Hello, everyone. Good afternoon now. It is 12 noon, and we are here once again for another Merrifield Garden Center webinar. Today we have Peg Beer doing fall containers. So you guys are going to learn all about getting your fall containers ready. It's going to be very, very exciting. Just a couple housekeeping things real quick. One is that this is for people who have not been with us before. This is a a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. It's a little bit different, so we can't see you or hear you, but of course you can see and hear us. But you will be able to ask questions using the Q&A tab. You'll be able to type them in the Q&A tab as well as the chat function. Either of those you'll be able to ask questions. And at the end of Peg's presentation, we're going to have some time to answer those questions. At the tomorrow, this webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow around this same time at noon, we should have you'll be getting an email that will have a link to the recording of it on our YouTube page. If you didn't happen to get the email, it will still be up on our YouTube page. Just type in Merrifield Garden Center in YouTube. You'll be able to see our this webinar, as well as most of our previous webinars, if you guys ever want to come back and look at, revisit one. But I think that's about all for the housekeeping. So now I'm going to turn it over to Peg, one of our wonderful, wonderful annuals people and perennials people as well, and a dear friend. Peg, it's all you. It's your turn.
Thank you, Danny. And Danny's kind of on the other side today. Normally he's here in the room with me as my sort of assistant and keeping me straight with this computer. But good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. And I hope that you will enjoy some of the plants that I will be sharing with you today that are stars in the fall containers outside. I am a big believer in enjoying containers wherever you can. And I think of ourselves as the container capital of the world, okay? But I do have some favorites, okay? Lots and lots of things can go into containers, but I do have some favorites, and I want to show you as many of those as possible today. So I'm going to bring up the first slide, which was actually taken a couple of years ago because we're just now getting in all of our squash and pumpkins and so forth. And before the weekend is here, we will have quite a few of them. And I am not ready to do a complete fall changeover, but I will be doing an in-house seminar here at the Fair Oaks location at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. And between now and then, I hope to have some additional information for you. This particular picture is a large collection of plants that are above a brick wall and that I can sit on my front porch and enjoy. And it is a grouping of plants that combine well together. At the moment, it is really geared towards attracting and feeding hummingbirds, and I really do love to watch them. They're going to be heading south any day now, and I will be able to remove a few of the things that they have enjoyed so much and replace them with some of the plants that I'm showing you today. So let me just give you an overview of a few of these slides before I bring up exactly what we're talking about. In this picture, you are seeing a lot of kale and some established kale because this is a little bit later in the season. It's before leaf fall. As you can see, the dogwood in the background have all turned their color, so they'll be dropping their leaves soon. And so this picture was probably taken in early October, okay? So let's bring up the next one, honey. Here is a little slightly different view of that same grouping, but a little closer area. When you're thinking in terms of containers and what is attractive in containers and does well through the winter. In the center of this picture is a dwarf evergreen, and we have some beauties out there. So if you've got a small space and you want something that's really interesting, and this pot is really large. I'm going to talk about the size of pots because that's important, particularly when you're trying to get something safely through the winter. So this is a container that is probably 18 inches in diameter and at least 8 to 10 inches deep. So that's going to hold a fair amount of soil. And there is a complete ground cover of thyme, a perennial thyme in this. And there is a dwarf spruce in here. And that, by the way, that dwarf spruce, I should have taken a picture of that as to what it is 2 years later. It's absolutely gorgeous and has been moved into a different featured area. But these dwarf plants will live in these containers and be extremely attractive. And of course, you can see how I have used some of the various pumpkins and gourds, etc. Now, here again, mums are a major part of the fall presentation. And I will explain to you some of the different varieties of kale as we go along. Okay. Here you're seeing a little bit more of the display of the pumpkins. By the weekend, we will have gotten into some of these wonderful stackables. Now, I don't puncture those pumpkins because I want them to last through Thanksgiving. I simply, when I make my selection, am sure that they will sit well on top of each other, okay? And I've had really good luck with that. And I love the stacked ones. And I've used a little grapevine around these. That's not necessary. What you're seeing in this picture are various types of kale, a lot of pansies. Pansies will bloom extremely well in the fall. They'll slack off a little bit in the wintertime, and then they'll pick up and bloom really well in the coolness of the spring. Okay, here is another favorite kale, okay? And again, something that's featuring even the little scarecrow. I do a lot of this because I'm also playing to my 3 little great grandchildren. Let's come back to me for a minute and let's talk about some of these kale, okay? The kale that you are seeing in the center of this picture is peacock kale. And let me explain that I know that there are a lot of people who love cabbage, and cabbage are absolutely beautiful. But if you want something to go through the entire winter, then you pick kale because it will go through. It is much hardier than the cabbage. And so if you're planting a good bit of it, you want to concentrate on kale. And I have around me a number of those varieties. And I love the contrast of color, but also the contrast of texture. This one, and now we're looking at small plants here, but properly fertilized, not over fertilized because they're going into winter and you don't want them to get too much stimulation. Okay, but we've got the peacock, which is nice and frilly, and you just saw that in the center of that picture. As a contrast to that and lower growing, this is a relatively new one to me anyway. I'm going to try it this year. It's crystal deep red, but look how nicely that plays together. Now, if you want a contrast of color in there, then you can pick up this peacock white. This is peacock red. This is peacock white, and it will be much whiter as time goes by. And look what a nice combination that is, okay? This one is absolutely the standout in the crowd, and this one is red boar. There again, you've got that nice contrast. But what you're going to get out of this red boar particularly is to let it go through winter, and then in the spring it shoots up these tall, beautiful blossoms that last for 2 or 3 weeks. And they're yellow and it's very pretty. So you get more bang for your buck with some of these, okay? Now there is a frilly one over here. Here again, this is a nice contrast. I really do love this one. This is Yokohama Red. And look again at the contrast of texture there. Very interesting. People often ask, are these edible? Yes, they are edible, but who wants to eat these beauties when you can enjoy them for such a long period of time? The one on my right is crystal snow, and it's going to get to be very, very white. It will be a nice contrast to the Yokohama red. Okay, really, really neat there. Here again, let's see. This is Yokohama red. This is Yokohama white, and it will be quite white. Okay, now this is again absolute favorite cream of the crop, Glamour red, and that will be very red. Okay, favorites now among the plants. Again, this is perennials. These are not perennials, but they will go through the winter and they'll be fine until the heat takes them out. Once they have thrown up their blossoms, it's time after that to go ahead and take them out. But when you're going into containers for the winter, again, among the Carex family, I'm about to have a catastrophe here because that's sitting on those things. Okay, in the Carex family, and there's a number of them, I have used a lot. This one is Evergold. It's a variegated one. It is perennial and it's beautiful still in the wintertime, which is great. But look at that nice contrast with that kale. Okay, really works beautifully. And then here's the darker one with it, which is also quite pretty. Kale are very useful, and along with the carrots, wonderful. Okay, here is again another. This one is the golden sedge carex. Okay, Evercolor. Look how pretty that is with the broader leaf of that kale, and this will be white, so it'll be a nice contrast with that one too. Okay, so let's move on to some of the other pictures. And
Peg, before you go on, can you say what the evergreen plant, the Evergold plant was again?
Evergold is called Everillo, Everillo, Everillo. And you'll see this in my future seminars used in the garden as a ground cover or in groupings within a perennial border. This is an absolutely beautiful plant. And I have some that are established now for 3 or 4 years, and they're at least 18 inches tall and flowing out. But they can be a wonderful ground cover that is evergreen, and also once it gets established is a wonderful weed suppressor too. Okay, let's go to the next couple of pictures and then we'll introduce others as we go along. Okay, this was one of the frilly ones that you saw earlier. This is again another stack. This is presentation. Presentation's everything, you know, that you enjoy and all your family and friends enjoy. Okay. Now, among the plants that I'm going to be working with and that I will have the opportunity to show more on Saturday are the true annuals that really will be gone with the first heavy frost. Okay. And among those, for instance, the Tradescantia, in the past we called it Wandering Dew. We don't do that anymore. It's Tradescantia. I will pick nice long stems of that and root it in water and overwinter it. So I will tell you more about overwintering some of these things. And there's a question, there's an ornamental pepper shown here too. And yes, you can eat them. I don't think you want to. I hear they're very, very hot. And when you're using it for decorations, why would you want to eat it anyway, you know? Okay, Bren took this shot, and I just thought it was a fun thing to show you. Again, and using pumpkins a little differently, okay? And I try not to overdo it, but I do love to have little accents here and there. And underneath the chair, you'll see a little concrete bunny. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit because our bulbs are in now, and maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are. And I do frequently plant them in containers. They overwinter well in my containers. You can see that I don't use small containers, okay? Number one, small containers are very difficult to keep watered in the heat of summer. And boy, did we have a hot summer, okay? And so I will talk more about the bulbs when I do seminars on that. But here again, this is a lot of tulips plus daffodils, narcissus, pansies, etc. here in this picture. But let again come back to me and let's talk for a minute about containers and how you do it, okay? Number one, I like to have a decent sized container. I don't want to spend all of my time watering. And I want them to be able to go through the winter. And this is a nice big container. It's lightweight, so this is why I picked this one. It's easy for me to handle, okay? So what is that? At least 16 inches at least. And it's pretty deep, almost 2 feet. There must be drainage in all your containers, otherwise you got a water garden, okay? We cut pieces of landscape fabric to make it affordable for people that come in. And from that 1 yard piece, we cut it in different sizes to fit the bottom of the container. I use this to keep the soil in the container and the little critters out, okay? I don't want the soil to leach out on my deck or wherever I'm using it. So that's the first thing that I do. And then I begin to fill the container with my potting soil. In the instance of that tulip picture that I showed you, I will probably put in a good 6 inches of soil and put the tulips in, and then continue to fill with the soil and with my plants on top of it. Yes, they will come through those plants and bloom in the spring. You can also do them in the container all by themselves, but this is how I work with them. And I don't think I have a picture showing you that particular thing, but I frequently do this, okay? Now, potting soils. Excuse me for disappearing for a moment. Okay, but there's not enough room for all the things I want to share with you. Every potted soil is not created equal, and we carry a lot of different really good potting soils. I have chosen my personal favorites, okay? We make our own potting mix, and it's very, very good. There are no additional additives in this potting mix. This is very good, but I know it's less expensive too, okay? But now I want to show you a total favorite, okay? Because it is loaded with good stuff. In addition to all the things that are in our potting mix, this contains earthworm castings and ocean forest, it's called, because there are a lot of byproducts from the ocean in here. And so that's a slow release, constant feed, not a heavy feed, but a light feed for all these things. And so I highly, highly recommend Fox Farm. It's going to be the most expensive probably that we carry, but for me, it's worth it, okay? Fox Farm, Ocean Forest, okay? Because they make several brands for different purposes, but for me, that's the one I use. We also carry others that have good additives too, one of which is Espoma. I really do like all of the Espoma product. They've been very good for me, and they contain earthworm castings, micronutrients, alfalfa meal, kelp meal, and feather meal. So it's slightly different. It's not the ocean forest mix, but it's still a good product. And I have to show everybody this one, although it's not a potting soil. It's produced by the coast of Maine and it has lobster compost in it. And I like the fact that they've used all of these byproducts as a good additive in these things. This one is too dense to be used as a potting soil, but it is a great one to do when you're planting in the ground, or if you're using Merrifield's potting mix, which is a great mix and doesn't have these other things incorporated. That's why it's a little less expensive. It's a good thing to put a couple of shovelfuls of this organic compost in that potting mix, and it will still drain well, but have more nutrients in it. So that's my favorite among the potting soils. Now, when I spoke to you of a couple of scoopfuls, now this may sound to you a little bit like a commercial, and I suppose it is, but it isn't really in my mind. I'm have been gardening just a few years, and I have favorites. And I like to share those favorites because they've worked better for me than anything else. I do a lot of containers, and we do a lot of containers here. Leo here at the Fair Oaks location, and if you come in, you can see wonderful combinations that he's done, and it can inspire you. He does a lot to sell, but he does a lot of special orders too. That's Leo, and I need to give him all the credit for that. Okay, this is a scoop that is absolutely wonderful. If you're doing a fair number of containers, you would like to have one of these scoops, okay? So treat yourself. Now let me share some other things that work for me. Everybody needs a pair of gloves, really. I love to feel the soil with my hands, but I prefer to have them covered. And we carry many, many styles of gloves, but I've used these for years and they're pretty unique. They're not cheap, okay? But you can wash them, and I've had them last for years. They are foxgloves. Now, they're not hanging among all of the millions of gloves, other gloves that we have that are good gloves too. They're usually in a basket. So you have to tell somebody to seek out those foxgloves. They come in different sizes. So I absolutely love my foxglove. I can feel everything with these. A lot of the gloves that we have, I don't use because I'm not comfortable with them and I can't feel things as easily. So, gloves. All right. You need a trowel. You need a trowel. Yes. And I certainly have a favorite here. Okay. And it's made in America, and I really like that idea. Okay, got to remind myself the exact name here. Okay, I've used them for years. Wilcox, Wilcox, Wilcox. Stainless steel, so you'll never buy another one. There are different sizes, and I use several of the sizes, but if I can only choose one, this is the one. Why? Because I can pry. I can put it in the ground if I'm planting and pry, or I can do that in my container and pry. And it has gotten a workout this week because I am removing a few things from my established containers and putting in some of these other interesting, the kale, for instance, okay? And I need to be able to pry that thing out. And so I will go into the side down all the way around the plant that I'm trying to take out because I don't want to disturb these. And then I'll pry it up. It's difficult to do that with a short handle. So if you can only have a few things, these are the ones that work for me, okay? Now, you've planted your container up. You need to water it thoroughly. You have used a good potting soil, and I didn't mention something that I also put in there. And then I told you that that Espoma potting soil was a very good potting soil. The Espoma products are, and these are all natural and very slow release. I go to Planthome. They have lots of different ones, okay? But I go to this one consistently because it's good for everything. And it's got all those nutrients in it. And it's got, oh my, feather meal, bone meal, all kinds of things in here that are good. So in addition to the good potting soil, before I plant it up, I will mix according to the directions thoroughly with that soil. Always plant them, slow release. Right now, going into winter, you don't want to fertilize heavily. Fertilizing lightly in these containers is a very good idea. But if you fertilize too long and too heavily, you'll stimulate too much growth that will be weaker trying to get it through the winter, okay? So I use this. If I use a liquid fertilizer as a boost, I would do it soon and I would do it half strength. And Jack's Blossom Booster is a good all-purpose fertilizer to use. That's one that I use. All right, we talked about that, okay? Now, your container is all potted up. You don't want to sit containers directly on your deck. It isn't good for the deck, okay? And again, this is not inexpensive, okay? But it lasts forever, and I've used them for years. It's on wheels. You can put a saucer on here that kind of hides it if it's showing. And let me tell you that having saucers underneath your plants isn't a bad idea in the summertime. And it isn't a mosquito trap for me because it's so hot in the summertime that when I water, I've got that excess water there that helps keep it from having to be watered so often. But it's so hot that that evaporates before the next day. So there's no time for those mosquitoes to breed in that saucer. However, when winter is coming on, you must take those saucers out because they will collect water then and freeze and break your containers, and you don't want that to happen. As far as what kinds of containers, the one I showed you was a heavy-duty poly container, and they've held up for me for years. I have very good luck, as long as I don't leave a saucer underneath, with most of our ceramics and with our really well-fired clay containers, okay? Terracotta. Every now and then I'll lose a terracotta container, but they're my basic black dress. And so I just have to say, okay, that one's gone. I'll get another one, okay? But this is wonderful because it's on wheels. You can move it if you need to regroup. You can move it if you need to clean beneath it. So I really highly recommend these. Now, wherever you put your containers, don't, in the wintertime, don't leave them sitting on soil because they will absorb that moisture and they may very well break. They're good on decks, they're good on patios, they're good on a piece of slate if you're staging them out in the garden, on gravel, heavy gravel, but not on soil, okay? Now, we'll have some other tips for you, but let me share some more plants with you. I'm losing track of the time thing. Usually I have it up here. Do you have the time on there? Okay, I just want to be sure that I leave a little bit of time for questioning. Can you hand me that, my dear? Thank you, thank you. And then the other one next to it, please. It's nice to have some good help here. Okay. let's talk about coral bells, heuchera, or heucherella, as is the case with this particular one, which is a cross. It's a cross between the coral bells and the tiarella, but again, quite hardy and most attractive in these containers. They really don't like the hottest afternoon sun. They love morning sun, and they'll love dappled light all day long, but really strong afternoon sun is not their forte, okay? Now, the other issue with these, deer don't eat my carrot. They don't eat the grasses. They don't normally eat the kale, but they certainly can, okay? They will eat my coral bells, and sometimes they don't eat the tiarella, which is the cross with the heucherella. But there are 2 or 3 varieties that they don't seem to like as well. I have to spray. I use usually Bobex, and it smells terrible when you're first applying it. And so if you're spraying and you're going out to a dinner party later, you want to be sure you take a very good shower, okay? Because you won't like the fragrance. Now, there's several brand names out there, and these are very, very similar in their component parts. A lot of people do use the liquid fence. Some people alternate. They'll use this one a little bit and this one as an alternate. I have stuck pretty much with this one, but I have a tremendous deer population. I live at Tyson's Corner. I was there first, only been there 66 years, okay? And for 20 or more of those years, I didn't have deer, but I do now. And it is very annoying because I can't enjoy it to the degree that I like to. These things work, but you've got to apply them fairly regularly. In the spring, when things are fresh growing, you have to use them at least every 3 weeks, okay? And then in the summertime, you can get away with a little longer than that. But if you forget, or you're distracted, or you're away and you don't spray, you could lose some of these things. But I would have nothing if I didn't use the Bobex, okay? So that is one of the things. Let's go back to a couple of the slides, honey, and see if we can see what else is going on, okay? That was the tulips. Let's continue. And that's how we planted the tulips, and then we plant the plants on top of it. Okay, now this is what is there today. And I'm going to do a much more thorough job, hopefully, before Saturday's class here in person at 10 o'clock Saturday morning. These are large containers. The smallest one is at least 12 to 15 inches and at least that in depth. And they have been there for a very long time. The big plant that you see is also a carex. And would you believe I can't at this moment remember the exact varietal name, but we do have it in the perennial section. It gets much, much larger than the other carex that I showed you, and it's a slightly different color. Instead of the gold variegation, it's more with the white variegation. And I have a color pickup that has been growing all through the seasons, winter included. So that plant has been in there all seasons. And the one next to it is an iris, okay? It is a variegated iris. And it does bloom a tiny purple blossom in the spring, but I'm using it more as a color pickup and a contrast with the other things. They are perennial. Also for contrast, so that sometimes you have things that are too fine and it looks busy. but a lot of contrast will keep those things from looking busy. And so in front of that, again, perennial is the lamb's ear. And this one, the varietal name is Big Ears. That's much larger than some of the others. And so I really do like this. Now, it will go through the winter. It isn't going to look quite as perky as it looks right now, but it's really neat. Behind that are a couple of varieties of the sedums. And one is the darker purplish sedum. And then there's a sedum that's planted in the container with that large carex. Now, they are perennials and they are coming into full bloom right now. And oh my goodness, the bees and the butterflies and whatever all love these. They will be very attractive. They will turn brown through the winter, but they will be there and they'll be effective. And if you've got the space in your garden after that, you can plant them out into your garden. The deer will eat those plants. Okay. They don't eat the carex. They don't eat the lamb's ear. They don't eat the iris. Okay. And let's move on to the next picture. I think no, not anymore. There'll be more of that on Saturday. Okay. So styles of containers. There's so many things you can do. In the front of this one, cascading out of that, is a sedum, Angelina. It's a perennial, okay? There has been pansies added already, and a wonderful little tower filled with the gourds inside, which is really kind of fun, you know? Actually, you could take those gourds out for after Thanksgiving, Christmas, and spray them gold and bronze and silver and carry them even in through Christmas. Okay. There's also in there peppers, the little ornamental peppers, and they are extremely attractive until a heavy frost kills them. When that happens, I use that trowel to scoop that little bad baby out, and it gives those pansies more room to fill in. Okay. All right, this is back to my own home, and I have a number of those towers that are planted with ivy, and they're all year, okay, evergreen and attractive. While this one was growing up, that little tower, I filled it with the gourds, and it was most attractive, and I enjoyed it. But I love those towers to grow things on, and ivy is particularly good for that, okay? The next one, yes, a little bit closer view of that, okay? And I've tucked into the bottom the little 4-inch mums and the peppers, okay? Another view, asters are a wonderful thing that lasts for a long period of time, okay? This is neighbors, and they've used a lot of corn shocks for that and a lot of mums, okay? This is a closer view of that with the stacks of pumpkins and the pansies and the mums. Another customer's home where we staged the mums on the steps and then filled these really large containers by the front door with a variety of things, primarily celosia and ornamental grass and mums and the cascading Lacemachia and ivy. So that's a fun thing to do. Truly, even small trees grow in containers, and I've got a number of these, but this one is where I had to have a tree cut off my deck. This is a huge terracotta pot, and I would highly recommend. We don't seem to get this large pot anymore. It's been there for years, but we do have the wonderful poly pots that just last forever with drainage in it now, good potting soil. But this has been in this container for several years, and it is the weeping Japanese maple. And underneath, it's planted with pansies and violas. And boy, do I love violas. I like a little bit of the contrast of the pansies, but those violas are charmers, okay? Another one for a lot of shade. Now, remember this. Even if you've got a lot of shade, for a lot of these annuals that are going to be finished with the first heavy frost, they've done their thing and you can use them wherever you want to. It doesn't matter if it's shade or not, okay? And this is using the Coral Bells, the Pansies, Achorus, which is another evergreen small grass that only gets about 18 to 24 inches tall, and an evergreen fern, okay? Here again, an evergreen upright in the back, grass in the back, with celosia, picking up the color of the pansies, the Lysimachia trailing out, and a kale, okay? This again is that beautiful red boar kale with the Lysimachia trailing out, the pansies, and the celosia in the background. Okay. Now this was just a fun thing, okay? And I'm going to talk on Saturday a little bit about enjoying these annuals until a hard frost is predicted, and then being able to dry some of them and use them in arrangements. But this happens to be mums with the canna lilies. I'm not sure that we have canna lilies right now, but this is something you can think about for the future. And staged inside of that, not growing, staged inside of that, which will hold up for a long period of time, are long stalks of ornamental grass. So you can have a really large and very attractive container doing this, and sometimes staging the cut grasses to go in it. Okay, so let's come back to me. I'll try to wrap up a couple of things, and then Danny, we will open it up for questions, but give me just a few minutes, okay? Okay, let's talk for a minute about celosia. Celosia is not cold hardy, okay? So when a hard frost comes, celosia is going to be gone. But in the meantime, it says fall like no other. And there's a number of colors. There's a deep burgundy-ish one, okay? And I will tell you on Saturday how you can cut these before frost, hang them upside down to dry, and use them as an absolutely beautiful dried flower arrangement because it retains its color beautifully. So you can get more bang for your bucks if you know how to use some of these things, okay? Now we have behind me also some petunias. So we'll talk for a minute about some of these things that are absolute annuals, and petunias are certainly one of those. They take cold weather quite well, and they bloom really well. They don't take a really hard frost, but they don't mind a light frost. And so you get a lot of bang for your buck with these petunias, and they come in such incredible colors. The color combinations are incredible. I brought this fun little thing out because these were purchased little plants and attractive ornamental peppers, really sweet. This is not the size container because it's not even 12 inches across, okay? That will sustain this plant in the sunshine, in the heat. But it would take part shade for a good bit, you know, without too much watering. But what a wonderful centerpiece this would make. And pretending that this was in a bigger container, look what happens if this plant were cascading out of a bigger container. And then when heavy frost takes them out, you can replace them with some of the other more hardy plants, the kale and the carex, etc. Okay, so that's a fun thing to do also. Let's see what else we've got back here. Well, primarily, oh, I didn't show you this one, and this is an absolute favorite of mine, okay? This is the dinosaur kale. Isn't that fun? It's really neat. It gets quite large and it combines well with a lot of other things. I love the purples with that. Very attractive, the purples with that. And that's the aster. Okay, I want to share with you at least one more thought before we begin to take questions. I have a huge roll of this, or at least it's not as huge as it used to be because I've been using it. My son gave me a huge roll of this for Christmas a few years back. It's reusable. This brand is called Frost Blanket. There's another brand that we carry called Harvest Guard. This is a very thin product. Rain will go through it, light will go through it, and you can leave it on for a long period of time if you choose to. I use it for a lot of different things, okay? Going into light frosts, sometimes we'll get a light frost that you don't want it to take out your beautiful annual plants that are there to enjoy at least through Thanksgiving. And so if you wrap this, and you need to wrap it somewhat loosely, if you know that there's a frost coming, you can wrap it somewhat loosely and tie it around with a string, okay? And you can leave that on if they're predicting frost for several days. It's fine, okay? That will sometimes extend your season. Going back to the kale and the cabbage, and I hope I brought this up because it is so important. Going back to the kale and the cabbage, and here's an established one that I just love. This is that Glamour Red that I so love. Much more established than the baby that I showed you. These things are attractive to the little yellow butterfly, okay, that will eat on these. And so this Captain Jack's insecticidal super soap, organic, okay, even the things that you collards and the things you planted in your garden, get those little bugs, the little worms on them that eat them. This is organic, and so you can spray on those and not worry about it for any of your vegetables or for these things. But if you begin to see little eating going on here, that's what's happening, okay? So this is a very important product. It can also be used, this can also be used to cover in your vegetable garden if you choose to cover those plants, and then use the sod staples, which look like a heavy duty hairpin, to weight it down. But when you're doing a container, you probably need to tie the string around it, okay? So these are invaluable in the fall and then again in the spring. In the spring, all of these cabbage and kale and the other vegetables do incredibly well also. But hydrangeas are just the love of my life. I love those things. But they're very susceptible to frosts. People wonder, why didn't my hydrangea bloom? A lot of times it's a very early frost. And if you wrap those plants with this frost blanket and tie it around or peg it down with those pins, then oftentimes it won't get frosted and you'll get that first big heavy bloom, which is absolutely delightful, you know. Danny, do we have any questions, honey? Dan,
Yes, we do have a bunch.
okay.
Um, all right, starting from, I'll try to start from the beginning. I believe were you talking about a wandering Jew earlier?
Yes, I was. Traders
Um,
Canyon.
can you spell that name? The
Pradiscantia. It is an annual, but I trim off the pieces, put them in water and root them, and then you can either put them in soil. I overwinter a lot of things in an area of my basement that's not finished, I used very inexpensive LED drop lights, which are inexpensive to buy, but also inexpensive to run. And I carry over a lot of things on a couple of tables in my basement. Among them are the Tradescantia. Okay.
Wonderful. Next is someone is wondering, how do you prevent potting soil from getting moldy in the bag? They currently store it inside. Is that a problem?
Well, I don't, number one, I don't know which brand it is. Um, it's best to store it where it doesn't stay wet. And if they're storing it inside, that shouldn't be a problem. I think I would definitely open it up and let it air out, okay? Because it must be, it wouldn't be doing that if it were dry, okay? But you don't want your potting soil to get moldy. You don't.
Gotcha. Going back to that scoop of yours,
Yes.
um, can you can you talk about what brand that is?
Well, there's a number of different brands, and this one is one that I haven't seen us carry lately. It's Bond, Bond, but there's a couple of them down there. And to be honest with you, I didn't look. Primarily, all three locations carry pretty much the same thing, but there's some minor variations. And I know with this one there is because this brand is new to me, but I can look at it and know that it's extremely well made and will last you for years. Again, stainless steel. Just as this is absolutely my favorite among all of our tools.
Gotcha. For your container gardens, is there anything that you're already removing from them as you're starting to transition?
Well, I primarily I'm not taking out the beautiful petunias that are a few of them, okay? Some of them that are looking a little tired, I am taking out. I have in that grouping particularly, which I will go into greater depth on, I'll have more time on Saturday. Um, it's planted up to appeal to those hummingbirds. And there's a lot of salvia that are small blooms, but very attractive to those hummingbirds. They're going to be leaving soon. And it's okay if I remove a few of those. There's 2 or 3 lantana. I'm not taking them all out because they'll all bloom till heavy frost. I'm going to take out a few and go ahead and get some of these things established because I want them to, okay? Particularly if I'm starting with the small plants, which is good when you're using a lot of different plants in a container. It's very nice to start with some a little smaller. You can see that even if you've got a big container and you're putting in this, you're not going to have a lot of room. You may want to fill this with pansies and this with pansies. So you're going to be a little more limited. Although I like to do that with some of them, I like to start small. Okay. And you can even start small with the pansies. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is a beauty. Look at this combination. If this doesn't say fall, I don't know what does. And in the containers where I have beautiful petunias, and I may replace a few, look how pretty it is with this particular pansy. Love the purples in combination with that. And these are the 6-packs, but they'll grow off quickly. Okay.
Hmm. Wonderful. Next is, if you find a pot that you love the look of, but it doesn't have drainage holes, is there a good way to create drainage holes?
I am not going to tell you how to create a drainage hole. You might bring it in here and our guys might be able to do it for you, but I don't want to be responsible for you causing that to break. You have to do it very carefully.
Gotcha. Next is going to be, um, It's funny, the two people have asked the same question that have the same first name but different last names. Um, how do you recommend covering newly planted bulbs to keep squirrels or chipmunks out of them, out
Well,
of the containers and digging?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I do have something that I'm not going to tell you is perfect, but I haven't had a problem with it. When you are planting up your containers, don't ever fill all the way to the top with potting soil. Because number one, that is very hard to water. The water will run off rather than in, okay? And when you're watering, whether it be in the ground or in here, don't just stand there for 3 minutes and whatever. And people will say, water until the water runs down through the hose, or whatever. If it got bone dry, that might go around the edges and not wet the inside. So you need to be sure that you're wetting that entire root ball, okay? Now, back to the potting soil. When you're finished with this and your plants are in, be sure that in this container, it's an inch down from the top. This is all planted up and there's still an inch of space above. Onto that space, I find 3/8 inch, small now, mind you, in the bags, 3/8 inch small gravel. My absolute favorite is the Seminole chips. The Seminole chips aren't round, they're irregular, and the slugs don't like them as well. But when you fill that at least ½ inch on top of your soil around your plants, that discourages the squirrels from digging in it. It also, when you're watering it, keeps the soil in the container and it doesn't splash out, okay? So it serves multiple purposes. Now, I'm no longer young. I don't throw these bags of gravel around as well as I used to. So sometimes, and I still prefer the gravel, okay? And the River Jack's 3/8 inch is also good. I sometimes will tuck the pine straw in there, but my preference is the gravel. Okay, it works.
And with the gravel and the pine straw, you wouldn't use any mulch or anything like that.
No, I don't use mulch. I
Um,
use the gravel.
Gotcha. Um, next one is going back to that frost blanket. What was the brand name of that one?
This particular one is called, it's Fabricate.
Fabricate.
Fabricate, frost blanket. And the other one is Harvest Guard.
Harvest Guard.
Both very good.
Harvest Guard.
Yes.
All right. Next up is any tricks to keeping mums blooming longer?
Yes, be sure you water them properly. Okay, let me explain a little bit about mums. There are, and they are usually perennials, okay? Not always. There's early blooming, mid-season blooming, and late blooming, which gives you mums for a fairly long period of time, going usually through Thanksgiving. They are going to finish up after about 3.5 weeks at most, okay? Particularly depending upon the weather, if it's really hot, they're not going to hold up as well. If it cools down and stays a little cooler, they'll stay prettier longer. But the main thing to do is don't take them home and say, I'm going to sit this on my step. See the size of that pot? See the size of my hand? It's not very big. and the tendency to dry out is tremendous. So the best thing you can do is put it into a larger pot with more soil around it, and then keep it well watered, not sopping wet, but well watered. Don't let it dry out because that'll finish it faster than anything else. Okay.
Sounds good. Well, we are at our our it is 1 p.m. now, so we have reached our time limit for today, but I want to thank you, Peg, and thank everybody for coming today and being here for our webinar presentation. For everybody who might have missed something or didn't get to get in right when the webinar started, we are going to have this webinar is recorded or is being recorded, and then we should have that up on our YouTube page by tomorrow afternoon. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Peg, before we sign out?
Oh, just to say for any of your friends or for yourself, if you would like to come to the seminar here at the Fair Oaks location on Saturday at 10 o'clock, I will certainly do a lot of repetition with this, okay? But I will also have some additional information, okay? So thank you very much for watching today, and remind people of our seminars, okay? Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you guys so much for being here today. And we will see you next time. Have a great day and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.